Alright, hi everyone, how's it going? And welcome to another video. Now, it's been a while since I've done a video, and the reason why that is I've been doing paintings lately. And I was going to do some more videos, but my paintings, I thought they were improving, so I really got into it. And that's more or less why I haven't done a video in a little bit. But now I'm back here today to do a video, and this video is going to relate to painting. It's going to relate to artists because I've been wanting to do a video on my favorite artists. So that's what I'm going to be doing this video on today. My favorite artists. Now, the artist I want to start out with, and a lot of you have probably heard of this guy, I want to start out by talking about Frank Frazetta. Now, Frank Frazetta was from Brooklyn, New York. He lived from 1928 and he died in 2013. And he's known for his fantasy art. Probably you've seen it. I'll show his art in just a moment. Just a little bit of background info on him. When he was only 8 years old, he showed a lot of promise as an artist. He was a prodigy. And at the age of 8, he had done a still life that most adult professional artists could not do. And the principal of the school he was at was so impressed with it, he couldn't believe what he had seen. So, yeah, Frazetta really had a gift for art. He was also a really good baseball player and had almost played for a team out west, but he didn't want to leave Brooklyn, so he never played. But, yeah, he had offers to work for Disney. Some of his colleagues had worked for Disney, but he wanted to do his own fantasy art, and he wanted to keep doing that. So he worked as a comic book artist in the 50s, but then in 1954, a book called Seduction of the Innocent came out. It basically linked juvenile delinquency to comics, and it said that comics were causing young men to become juvenile delinquents. And as a result of this, there was a crash in the comic book industry, and Frazetta, as well as a number of other comic book artists, found themselves out of work. So Frazetta then did some stuff for Mad Magazine. He did a picture of Ringo Starr. Some people in Hollywood liked the picture of Ringo that he did, so they had him design movie posters. And back around this time, late 50s, early 60s, movie posters tended to be very cartoony. They had a very cartoonish appearance to them. And he did that for a while. There were really some cool movie posters done at this time, I have to admit. I mean, and Frank Frazetta was a part of that. You know, later on, I know they would have the picture of the actors in the movie around the margin of the poster. But at this time, yeah, it was very cartoony, a lot of it. You know, a lot of stuff was really well drawn. I mean, if you go back and look at some of that stuff from the 70s, I think it's pretty cool. But, yeah, so he did that for a while. Still wanted to do fantasy art. So in the 60s, he began doing a lot of covers for Conan books. Conan was written by Robert E. Howard in the 30s. But Frazetta began designing the covers for these books in the 60s. Originally, these stories were in a magazine called Weird Tales, and then later on, they were published in books. And the same thing happened with Lovecraft, too. He was also in Weird Tales. Later on, his stories were put into book form. And a guy, like I said, who illustrated or did the covers for these books was Frazetta. Now, here's Frazetta painting right here that I like quite a bit. As you can see, it's a guy in a boat, this big sea creature coming out. I mean, really some cool stuff. There's another one. This is always kind of one of my favorites, actually. This was the cover of a Conan book, and it's Conan engaging in combat with what I thought were Vikings, but apparently, from what I understand now, I believe they're supposed to be frost giants. And as you can see, the background, there's like a mountain. Now, a trademark of Frazetta was to show the action and the characters in detail. but the backgrounds a lot of times would be lightly suggested. You'd see that in a lot of Frazetta. I should add also, this was the cover of early 1970s album by a band called Dust that featured the drummer from the Ramones in it. But yeah, the band Dust used this as their cover. Frank Frazetta would, a lot of bands would use Frazetta art as their album covers, you know, especially Molly Hatchet, and I'll get to that in a moment. But this one right here was the cover of a Nazareth album. Nazareth was an early metal band from Scotland, and this one, I believe, is called The Brain. Kind of has a bit of a psychedelic appearance to it, if you can see. It's of a guy appears to be fighting some sort of a demon. Yeah, definitely, you know, a cool one. Fighting a demon. Like I said, I believe it's called The Brain. Now here's another one he did. Now this comes from the John Carter stories. John Carter was a character of the same guy who came up with Tarzan. He also had another character, John Carter, who was a guy from Earth who had been transported to Mars. And Disney made a movie, John Carter, not too long ago, and it got terrible reviews. It wasn't well received. It did bad at the box office, but I actually liked it. I thought it was a good movie. I like John Carter. So, yeah, and as you can see right here, the woman is wearing what looks a lot like Princess Leia's slave girl outfit. And George Lucas was a fan. This is where he got the idea of her slave girl outfit from, Frazetta. So, yeah, George Lucas was a big fan of Frank Frazetta, as were other people in Hollywood. Stallone was a big fan. Robert Rodriguez is a big fan. Clint Eastwood is a big fan. In fact, Clint Eastwood even had Frazetta design a movie poster for him. This is from The Gauntlet. And I've seen The Gauntlet before. I actually don't think I've seen the whole thing, but I did see the part where all the bullets are flying into the bus. As you can see, there's Clint Eastwood, and clinging on to him is a woman, I believe her name's Sandra Locke. She recently passed away, but at one point in time she was a long-term girlfriend of Clint Eastwood. Don't believe they ever married. But yeah, like I said, Clint Eastwood was a big fan. Now this right here is probably the most famous of all Frazetta's work. This one he did in 1973, and it's called The Death Dealer. It was so popular that publishers actually had someone write a novel series around this character, the Death Dealer. And that was quite common. People would actually write stories around Frazetta paintings. The publishers would ask, do you have anything laying around? If you did, they would find writers to write stories around his paintings, because his paintings would sell the books. You know, there's no question about it. And a lot of people pick up Frank Frazetta books or albums and read them or listen to them because of the covers. Because the covers are just so cool. So this is Death Dealer 1 in 1973. It's another one. I believe this one's called The Sea Witch. And a band by the name of Wolf Mother actually used this as their album cover. They were popular a few years back. They had a song called Woman that had some popularity. They were one of the first of these bands to start playing like 70s throwback music, which I love. But they were one of the first bands to start playing that kind of music. Now more and more bands are doing it. And I know there were some bands before them that were doing it, but they were among the first. So there's another one right here. This is a cool one. Very striking image of Conan on a steed, jumping into what appears to be an undead army and some humanoid creatures. if this doesn't make you want to pick up the book and read it, I don't know what would. I mean, yeah, a lot of people have said, they would see this when they were a little kid and they were just like in awe of it. Like, what is this? Again, as you can see, the background is kind of lightly suggested. It looks like there's some vultures flying around. Yeah. There's another one. I think this was from one of the first Conan books. Might have been the first. And one thing I should mention about Frazetta is he was very good at painting skin. He had this real elaborate way of painting skin in different, to make different textures, to make different, shading. He really knew how to do skin. It wasn't just using one color of paint. He would sort of mix it and shade it, so it was a very complex process. There's another Conan one. This is one of the more famous Conan. This is this classic Frazetta right here. A woman clinging to the leg of Conan. And definitely classic Frazetta. He did other book covers like the Mothman Prophecies. This is a book that came out, I believe, around 1980. And it was made into a movie later on with Richard Gere. But this is the cover of it. As you can see, the Mothman right on the cover. There he is. I remember seeing the movie. I remember really liking it. I don't remember a whole lot about it. I would have to see it again. But if you're interested in Mothman, there's a lot of info on Mothman on YouTube. A lot of people talking about him. But yeah, definitely thought that was cool. But yeah, so that right there is Frazetta. He would do more Death Dealer paintings. He had a whole series of Death Dealer paintings. In fact, when he died, the painting he was working on was a Death Dealer painting. I don't know if it was Death Dealer 8 or 9, or not sure. He had done a number of them. But he did that one, like I said, starting in 73. But interesting thing about Frazetta, I do want to mention this, was the fact that as he was getting older, there was this big fight among his kids as to who would get ownership of his paintings when he died. This big fight. There was a Frazetta museum in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, or not Pittsburgh, somewhere in Pennsylvania, like a small town. And there was this big fight among his kids as to who gets his paintings. One of his sons thought that his brother and his sister were going to take his paintings and possibly sell them. So what he did was he broke into the museum at night, loaded $40 million worth of paintings onto a truck, and then the silent alarms in the museum went off and he got arrested. And he did some jail time for this. So yeah, there was this whole big dispute among his kids as to who gets his paintings. They're worth a lot. And you have to admit, like the paintings I showed, if you put those paintings up in, say, the New York Metropolitan Museum of Art or the Art Institute of Chicago, I can almost guarantee you it would probably be the number one room in the museum. I mean, that's what people have said, and I think they're right. I think they're right. It would probably be the biggest room, or one of the biggest in the whole museum. Because, yeah, it's really some, great artwork. Now, that's Frazetta. And one other thing I do want to mention about Frazetta, before I go on to the next artist, was kind of his approach to painting. He would get these commissions to do those paintings that I showed you, and he would have a month to do it, but he wouldn't get started, according to his kids, he wouldn't get started until the day before, and he would work all day into the night and just really exhaust himself working on the painting, and he would pull off a great painting by dawn. Pull off just a great painting by dawn. He would have it done, and he would just be exhausted afterwards. He'd be exhausted for about 3 days, after doing this. So yeah, I just thought I'd add that. Now I want to move on to the next artist. That was Frank Frazetta. The next artist I want to talk about is my favorite artist of all time. This is my favorite, and that would be Roger Dean. Now, Roger Dean is primarily an album cover artist. He's done a lot of covers for various bands, particularly bands like Yes. Roger Dean would do these album covers for, and he became very popular and very much in demand as an artist. Everyone wanted a Roger Dean album cover, because of, like Frazetta, it would sell the album. That was the reason why they wanted it. It would sell it. And he's mostly famous for his floating rocks, as you can see right here. Now, interesting side note, James Cameron actually used floating rocks in Avatar. He had those floating rocks. And apparently Roger Dean actually sued him over that, but it was thrown out in court. But yeah, I just love how he did this. As you can see, the shading is really good. Kind of gives it this almost like evening kind of look. But he would have these wavy trees, these floating rocks. He was also famous for his dragons. I would say he's famous for his floating rocks, his dragons, and his arching rocks. More floating rock stuff. Swervy tree. Just great art all the way around. Another one right here, like this one. Pretty cool. More Roger Dean. There's another Roger Dean right here. Now, he did this for the band called Gentle Giant, progressive rock band. He was kind of the king of the prog rock album cover. And this is from Gentle Giant. And I've listened to this album recently. I really like the album. I also like the cover art. But, as you can see, it's an octopus. Now, this is how you do an octopus. I recently did a painting kind of inspired by this somewhat, where I did an octopus, and I thought it was decent, but I just love how he did this. This octopus is on this, and I don't know if this is watercolor or if it's pour paint that the octopus is kind of sitting on. But either way, it's a cool technique. Here's one of Roger Dean's dragons right here. They're one of his dragons. Pretty cool. More of his rocks and his trees. Another one for a Yes album he did called Relayer. This is one of his more famous, probably one of my favorite of his. Definitely one of my favorites of his. He also did some artwork for a band called Budgie. And I did an album review on a Budgie album, my favorite Budgie album, In for the Kill. This is the one that was before that album, called Never Turn Your Back on a Friend, and he did the cover art. He did the cover art for their second album, Squawk, as well. But, yeah, definitely some great cover art. Yeah, Budgie are like a band that go back to the early 70s, very Black Sabbath-like. If you like Black Sabbath, you'd like Budgie. In fact, you may have heard Metallica do two Budgie covers, Crash Course in Brain Surgery and Bread Fan. But, yeah, great band, underrated band. They're kind of the king of the underrated early metal bands, in my opinion, Budgie. Now, right here, this was Roger Dean's first album cover he designed right here. This is for a band called Gun, another early metal band. Not too well known, very obscure, but they sound very modern. Some of the songs on this album just have a very modern, heavy sound to them. Judas Priest even covered one of them. but yeah, very heavy, modern kind of sound. Highly recommend this album, the first Gun album. They put out a couple albums, then split. But yeah, Roger Dean has the distinction of doing their first album cover, and it was the first album cover he had ever done. This is another album cover for a guy. I don't know. I think this guy had kind of a gimmick, like a space gimmick, maybe something kind of like David Bowie. His name was Ramesses, and this was the cover of his album. As you can see, it appears to be a spaceship blasting out of a church. But it appears that part of the church is the spaceship. This is blasting off. Cool painting. Here's the same thing, but it's not really showing the church. It's showing the spaceship. I don't know if showing it blasting out of the church is controversial or not, and they only wanted to show the top part of it blasting off. That I don't know. But as far as I know, this is what I believe the cover looked like. And there's another one. It's like lizard-like dragon creature following this pathway up to this structure. Some of his structures that have an almost organic look to them. You know, very otherworldly. That's what I love about Roger Dean's art. It's so otherworldly. It just doesn't look like anything you would see here. But in some ways, there are some similarities, but it's just so cool like that. Like I said, definitely would sell the albums. People would want to buy the album based on the Roger Dean cover. You know, he was very much in demand in the 70s. And then, in the early 80s, he did this for the band Asia. It's a pretty big album when it came out. You know, because it had a hit on it in the heat of the moment. But yeah, this is the cover of Asia's first album. He designed this. There's another one he did of a tiger right here. Some more Yes stuff. And I remember, this is the first Roger Dean cover I ever saw. And I remember just looking at it. I couldn't take my eyes off it. I'm like, wow, this is incredible how he did this. But, you know, floating rocks, curved rocks, swervy trees. There's a lot of, you know, famous Roger Dean designs in it, you know. But yeah, definitely a cool painting. Another one he did. Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, this almost has a little more of an 80s look to it. I don't know if it is 70s or 80s, but it does, I don't know, it just seems like it has a little bit of an 80s appearance in a way. Either way, cool picture nonetheless. There's another one he did. This was, I believe, the second Asia album. I don't think this album did as well as the first one did. Asia, from what I understand, was like a super group. Members of different prog bands were in it. Yes, I think there were some members of King Crimson that were in it. Here's the second one. Here's another one he did. And just one thing I do want to point out is this video will be in probably multiple parts. So if this video cuts out at any time, there will be a part 2. There's another one. Now, this one's really cool. I mean, look at that. More of the curved rocks. More of those, like, here's some of those arching rocks I was talking about before that he was very famous for. Those arching rocks. Another, like, otherworldly building of some sort. Another one, and one thing I'll say about his art that I really do like about it is it does have an esoteric feel to it. There is a sense of mystery you get from a lot of it. I mean, by looking at this, you could see, part of its charm is the fact that you're not really too sure what it's about. There's that level of esoteric mystery to it. This appears to be a rider on some kind of a, cybernetic horse of some sort. But you don't know. And you know what? You're not really supposed to know. That's one of the things I like about this kind of art, and a lot of art and music in general. You're not always supposed to know everything. One thing they've done in movies nowadays that I'm not always crazy about is they'll reveal everything. They won't have anything be mysterious. They won't cover up everything. They'll just tell you everything about all the backstory of the characters. Like Halloween, for example. When Halloween came out, Michael Myers came off very mysterious. You didn't know really a whole lot about him, or why he was the way he was. There was some mystery in that. Nowadays, they don't have any of that mystery. They just throw everything at you and tell you everything. Part of what makes something dark and mysterious is that mystery. So I kind of don't like that movies have taken that turn nowadays. But here's another one. They've taken that turn of, like I said, just showing you and revealing everything to you rather than having that mystery to it. I liked it when there was that sense of mystery. And, you didn't know. You just didn't know. That's part of what creates the fear, is the fact that you don't know. Now, Roger Dean had also designed furniture. In fact, he went to the Royal Academy of Art in London, I think it was in London, I'm not 100% sure, but he went to the Royal Academy of Art, and initially he was going to be a furniture designer. Then he got into designing, album covers and whatnot, but originally he had designed some furniture. He designed some stuff for a jazz club, and it always had a very, futuristic look to it. Kind of like what you see in the beginning of A Clockwork Orange, that room that they're in. Stuff kind of like that you saw in the early 70s. And I just love that look, that kind of early 70s futuristic look that things would have. And this is an example of it. This is actually a bed he designed. I believe it was in the early 70s. It's like a cocoon. And I just love that, like I said, that 70s futuristic kind of stuff. It's like what they thought would be available in the future. Of course, they didn't know there would be an internet and all these other things, but yeah, definitely cool. There's another one. This wasn't a prog band. This was actually a funk band. You did a couple album covers for this band with this winged elephant. This has got to be another one of my favorite Roger Dean's as well. You see this thing's going right for this lizard. Definitely a cool cover. Here's another one with a badger that he did for the band Badger. I mean, you can make even simple things that you would see in nature, and just make them very otherworldly looking. I mean, look at this. This is a cool way to depict a badger. Another one I like. Yeah, I mean, he just did so many album covers for so many bands. But like I said, particularly he's known for what he did for Yes. But yeah, definitely a big fan of his stuff. I think I showed you all of what I have. I know he did some, I don't have a picture for it, but some of what he did for the Ben Uriah Heap was pretty famous as well. This is part of it. This is from the Magician's Birthday. But he did another one that was really cool for the album, I believe it was Demons and Wizards. Yeah, Demons and Wizards. But, yeah, so that's Roger Dean. He is my favorite artist. Really like his stuff a lot. And now that I talked about him, I'm going to go on to another artist who also designed album covers as well. And this is an artist by the name of Patrick Woodroffe. And, you know, if you're familiar with British fantasy and science fiction artists, you've probably heard of him. I will show you some of his more famous works of art, but here's one of them that he did. He also did album covers. I'll get to that in a moment. But here's one of them. It's another one he did. Now, the interesting thing about Patrick Woodroffe was the fact that he's entirely self-taught. He actually studied languages in school. He didn't study art. He just got into art later on. I think it was something he always kind of did, but for some reason